What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to the podcast, episode 118 with BanterFlix.
A lot of episodes.
Yeah, a lot of talking.
This one was a really good one, though.
Very
Who did we have on, though?
We had BanterFlix, I told you.
Who from BanterFlix?
Jim and Trez from BanterFlix. Jim, he's the editor-in-chief, and Trez is the deputy editor. Had them on, it was a great talk. Talked for about over an hour, I think it was, about like just movies, the film industry, and of course local cinemas.
Yeah, it was a really good chat. Check BanterFlix out. They were fucking real good guys. It was a real good conversation, and I actually really enjoyed that one. I know I always say that, but sometimes I don't enjoy it. Yeah. This one I actually really enjoyed.
Sometimes you lie.
Sometimes it's a chore.
Yeah.
This one was actually a really good conversation.
Their BanterFlix is all about movies, and they had their own podcast called We Need to Talk About Movies. Give them a listen to. So they're really enthusiastic and interested in movies, probably a bit more than us, but it was good to get their insight because they know more about us. More about us.
They know more about movies.
Well, they know a lot about you.
They did, yeah. Weird.
Like you knew you're.
Anyway.
But yeah, give it a go and see if you like it.
You are now listening to MCPodcasting.
Oh my god. I'm not gonna lie, lads, as I started there, we haven't recorded yet.
Come on, Dan.
Oh my god.
Go. Sorry.
Jesus.
Do I accept and because it was who was it I was interviewing? I can't remember. It was like it was a director, and halfway through the conversation, I was like, having to re-ask questions that I've asked slightly different, rather than being like, because you only have like a set amount of time, and you don't want to come across as being like,
you're wasting their time.
Well,
yeah,
we had done
that
this.
Literally just happened there now for us. For anyone listening, we literally just didn't hit record.
You know what? I'm gonna be a diva. I'm gone.
Yeah. We had that happened to us before as well. We were doing like, because we both quite like history and stuff, and we were doing like a World War series, and we were just going over it and talking about it between ourselves, and we spoke for over an hour, and we realized we didn't record.
Yeah, we did a proper real detail, like revisit World War II, and we want to talk about all the heroes and no one talks about and what really happened. An hour and a half we did a recording for it. It was really good. Didn't hit record.
Yeah, and then we just scrapped the whole series and just never went back to it, because you can't, once you speak for an hour and a half. Yeah, once you speak for an hour and a half and you've done it.
The worst that ever happened to me, just in general, kind of just with podcast and editing, was I think last year, myself and a guy, local filmmaker, Jim McMorrow, who's a diehard Halloween nut, we sat and did a podcast round at his apartment, and we just kind of sat and chatted about and ranked all the Halloween movies. And I was like, yeah, we talked for like 2.5 hours. I was like, yeah, this is great, it's recorded. But I was exporting the file, and I was like, closed the laptop down, thought it had all completely exported. And then when it came up the next day, it was like, do you want to save this? No, it's exported, it's fine. But because it closed the laptop down before it had finished, a 2.5 hour podcast, we had 20 minutes. 20 minutes worth of exporting, and it was like,
as I said, you can't go back and ask, like, do it again, because it's not,
it's
like,
done. Yeah,
it's not natural either.
Yeah, then it's all just like almost like you prep for the questions. It's not, and that's it. Do you? And obviously, if you're interviewing people who are like in the film industry, you obviously have set questions. But you try to stick to them questions, or would you kind of differ and kind of ad lib a wee bit more?
I know when I started out doing stuff, like particularly red carpet stuff, I was like, right, I'm gonna get all this time in to say all this kind of stuff. And seeing a red carpet scenario, you're literally like 3 minutes, boom, gone.
Yeah.
Before you know what they're going, and you don't know what they're gonna say. Generally, what I will prime myself for is like, what's my question to my end question? What is in the middle of it? What's the question I really want to ask? Maybe that sometimes comes to the end, and then what's my kind of closing question, because it can flow. And because if you go in, that's only some different strokes for different folks. What I find, if you go in with like a lot of preset questions of what you're going to ask, you'll not listen to what they're saying.
Yeah,
and then
that's sometimes
you can probably get a better interview if you're just, you might not want, and the end of it might necessarily want to talk about what you wanted to talk about, but you'll probably get it's my only humble, you might get a better interview because you might be talking about something and they'll know you're listening.
I agree. Like, I feel like with some podcasts or some interviews, you always get the impression that the person asking the question isn't actually listening to the answer. They're just waiting to speak again. It's almost like they say something and they don't care about what the person's actually saying. They're in their head, they're just constantly thinking about the next thing they're going to say, and then it's just not an organic conversation. It comes off, and you can tell, like, I mean, we have access to so many things on YouTube, As soon as you watch a video and after a couple of seconds you're like, it doesn't feel comfortable, switch off. You're gone. You know, it takes a lot to keep people's attention.
You almost want your own personality to shine through in the podcast, don't you? Or an interview, because that's why you want people to come back to you. You want people to come back to you, don't you? Like for your intake on things, rather than coming to the podcast because we have BanterFlix on or like Paddy Barnes on. You want people to come back for you and see your intake. And if your question is just the same question they got asked on BBC or some shit, what's the point?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's sometimes you'll have to kind of go through, you know, there's going to be questions that they know they're going to ask and they're primed for it. You know, I always remember, I think, was it Mark Kermode talked about interviewing Brian De Palma, and he kind of said the first 5 minutes was just really hostile because he was like, this is a film critic, he knows who he's going to ask. But once De Palma realised that Kermode was actually a fan of his work, he said the whole interview just completely changed in the last 10 minutes. Was great. He's like, could we go back and start those first 5 minutes again? Rather than you kind of coming in and your assumption of what it's going to be like. But and
I think that's the difference for a podcast and an interview. That's me and Stephen we're still trying to probably make. We're trying to make it to be like, it's a conversation. It's not an interview. It's just a general chit chat about people and about things. Obviously, this podcast is going to be more about movies. I know times can be all about sports, but it's all trying to have a conversation where you feel relaxed to open up and tell us things that you wouldn't have told a normal interview per se, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense, completely sense.
Yeah.
I think whenever we do our own podcasts, you know, just like the normal episodes, we try our best to get them in like a format. And Jim knows this, like whenever we used to do the recordings in the Odeon, again, when you were allowed to see people, we would have went in before and been like, great, we'll talk about this. And there's many of times that we've went in to talk about one film and then it's turned into a complete different podcast. Like there was one time we were, I think it was a few years ago, we were talking about The Faculty. We were supposed to be talking about The Faculty. And then I think it turned into a film. I think it was a full episode then about like the 90s just in general, like films, TV, clothes, you know, being born. I was born in the 90s. So like the episodes that we would do would be more conversational based, and I think that it's a bit more natural, and I think that's what people come to tend to listen to the episodes for. The same with you guys, like I think it works much better with a conversation.
As I said, sometimes it may not be the way you wanted it, but you get a better podcast out of it or a better conversation out of it, which I find, for me, that's where I worry. Stephen's a bit more laid back in that sense. I'm always about to have these questions because we did an episode one time and I had all these questions read out on where I wanted to go and where I had like the start, middle, end, and then the guy basically answered all the questions like already in one like 10-second swoop. Like, I'm doing this, did that there, I'm have this here, I'm happy enough. I'm like, oh, and then I was just thrown off. But thank God, Steve, that's the good thing.
Freestyled it.
That's the good thing with having. I can never do a podcast by myself. I need someone else to. If I freak out and I panic, someone carries on. And same way Stephen breaks down, has his mental breakdowns every episode. Like, I carry on.
We used to have hair before we started this.
Lovely long hair.
It was down the ear.
Stressed you out.
Were you in that Vidal Sassoon advert?
Oh, yes, that was me.
Yeah. I thought I knew it somewhere. No, I've had those. I mean, I've had that before, and sometimes you'll maybe come in with a question and you'll kind of say, right, well, I know you've kind of answered that and you've kind of preempted that with that previous answer, but could it push you a little bit further, or could it give you you might find yourself being able to kind of go off on a segue. It happens. I mean, there's stuff. I mean, I've done awkward as fuck interviews. I mean, I remember interviewing at one of the one of the Comic Cons here. The one I always talk about was a Carl Weathers, and it was just the most awkward fucking thing. I always talk about this, right? Because it was one of the first ever times I ever did an interview, and Carl Weathers, and I can't remember the guy's name, and I feel terrible. I was talking to someone and he remembered his name on a previous pod. And it was the guy that plays the young Clark Kent in the original Superman movie before Christopher Reeves. He's like playing in his teenage years, and they kind of have prosthetics to make him look like Christopher Reeves. And they have the same agent. And I was like, can I interview Carl Weathers? I was not interested in this guy at all. Actually, the person I wanted to interview was Margot Kidder because I had a crush on her when I was younger. A serious crush. And Carl was like, if you interview Carl, you have to interview this guy. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. Interviewed this guy, can't remember his name, and it was great because he was talking about working with Richard Donner, working with Christopher Reeves. Margot Kidder wasn't doing any interviews at all. She refused because of her history with mental illness, and she didn't want to bring anything up. Because he's sitting beside her, he then brought her in and was, do you remember this with Richard? I was like, great interview. And I was like, I got to meet Margot Kidder. We talked about cats. And I was like, I'm happy. My crush from when I was young, when you didn't understand that things might have been recorded in the 70s. So she's not that age now. You know, when you're like old and you're younger, you're like, I have a crush on you. And you're like, whenever. Blah. Interviewed Carl Weathers and wasn't the people about. And I was like, your agent has agreed 5 minutes. And he's like, what about the fans? I was like, there's not a fucker about. I said, there's no one about, but if anyone comes to get anything signed, I'll happily stop. Mm-hmm. He's like, 5 minutes, you said? Yeah. And I'm sitting, I have the camera. You can't see it. Well, that's the camera. I'm going to fuck this all up now. That's the camera I normally use when I'm out and about, but it's just kind of taking up residency here.
Yeah.
I just seen this guy every so often. I was doing it, and I just seen him kind of like,
oh no,
looking down. And I was like, I've suddenly clocked on. I was like, you're just sitting, counting down to 5 minutes when it's over.
Apparently there are a lot of celebrities. I mean, I guess whenever you watch like press junkets, we don't understand from the outset that these people are being interviewed by so many different people and they're getting asked the same questions over and over again. And it takes a real nice person to come across really nice every time. But yeah, I'd imagine that's something that you encounter, that you're trying to be different to the last person that interviewed them, because it's almost like you're trying to get the person to recognise that, you know, I'm not a bad guy, I'm just asking you a couple of questions, I just want to come across okay, I care about what you're making. But I can imagine from the other side it would be tough to go through those press. But then again, they get better.
Oh yeah, there's no denying it. I mean, I remember sitting, because the way it works, you get 15 minutes, mostly at a junket, and that's it. And that includes your setup time and everything. And then once you're into that, like, I remember, who was I interviewed? I can't remember. And we were halfway through it, and just the guy came in halfway. I was like, time's up, you're gone. And you're like, once or twice it's happened, and the person has shooed them away because they're talking. The worst thing you can get is someone who just, like me now, it just fucking talks.
Yeah.
And then before it's like, yeah. Anyway.
But I think that's 5 minutes or even 15 minutes to talk to anyone. That's not enough time in it. Like, I've noticed when we do podcasts, you just realise like how much you actually talk shite. You realise like, oh my god, we've been talking 30 minutes and we haven't got into the topic we wanted to get into. And that's what's good, because it's a podcast, it's your own format, you can do what you want. But if you're in these like Comic Cons getting 5 minutes, how can you prepare them questions? I just couldn't, like.
You just go for it. You, to be honest, like the worst one I ever did was the very first time, and I'll probably get the name of the film wrong. It was the blonde girl. She was like the baddie in Buffy, and she was in either Just Bring It or Bring It On. I can't remember which of those two films it was. One of those two. I can't remember.
One's a sequel.
Was it Faith? Is it Faith? I think. I can't. And I interviewed her, and I just got the wrong name of the film in my head, and I couldn't get it out. And it was just like, it edited into the 5 minutes, and everybody's like, do you want to restart that? And you're like, I'll just edit it. It's like, no, do you want to restart that to at least get the name of the film wrong? And you're like, my wife was with me at the time. She was filming, and it was like, the poster is right behind you, Jim. The poster is right. Just look at the fucking poster. And it was like, nah. But as I say, you know what? For everyone like that, you get an interview that you might not think is going to be great, and you just love. Like the one I have a bit of a crush on. I'm a happily married man, but is a director, South American director, Issa Lopez, and interviewed her last year at the QFT. She sat and did an hour and a half, basically, of a Q&A, and I was like, we're going to have 5 minutes. We're going to have 5 minutes. She's talked out. She'll want to go home. Mm-hmm. And we talked for like nearly 40 minutes with the QFT staff kind of like going, can we go home? I was like, she's talking. Okay, dude. But she's, you know, and then you just get that kind of reminder of like, I like doing this. When it goes well, you get a massive adrenaline rush. And then when it goes badly, you just want to like,
die.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you said there's something. No, you just die. You just want to die and just want to like, oh, fuck it, I'm going to go and close everything.
Yeah. So I think a question I really want to ask you to is just like, given that your format, is all about interviewing people one-on-one, doing your show, how are you managing like the whole COVID situation and even the new restrictions now where you can't even be in the same room as your colleagues, never mind a new director or an actor and stuff? How are you managing that?
Just Zoom. Just to be honest, man, Zoom. We tried Skype for a while. Skype's grand, but then we started using Zoom, and that's the way. Zoom is probably handier for talent, to be honest with you, because they're like a couple of interviews I've done like the last month will be like can't remember the name of the director who did You've Been Trumped, or the director of St. Francis, along with the writer and the guys who did I can't remember the name of the horror film. I apologize, but it's in their living room.
You're a busy guy. You're a busy guy. You can't remember.
But it's in their living room or in their kitchen, so it's kind of easier for them. They're not having to go to a hotel and this, that, and other. They're just kind of working at their leisure, and you can find yourself. You still have those same time constraints, but people will just kind of sit and, like we are now, just talk, and you kind of get a bit nervous about it at the start, and you kind of think you think to yourself, "This is what you've got to get over." That I have 15 minutes to make an impression, and I want them to remember me like 5-6 years time, and you just have to accept that's not the case. You're one of like maybe 50 people, and all you can do is those like 10 or 15 minutes is just chat the best we can. When we did the film about the horror film, we ended up talking about Fright Night for half of it, and that was great because they both loved Fright Night, and it turned out that their father worked in Evil Dead, so it was like boom.
Oh, amazing!
Let's talk about that, guys.
So you maybe
The Wretched. That's the name of the film. The Wretched.
Maybe because of everything that's going on, that you're finding a lot of people have more time. Like we had like for us, this was absolutely massive. We had Jared Williams on, who is a renowned journalist who co-wrote a book about the Hitler conspiracy.
Grey Wolf
and how Hitler escaped and lived the remainder of his life in Argentina. And this guy is he used to work on the BBC, he used to work on Sky, he was on the History Channel. Like, he's a massive guy for us to come on our wee dingy podcast.
Yeah.
And we just reached out to him, and he was like, yeah. And we were like,
just brass-necked it. And I think now, because before we would always want someone to sit down with us, we would never entertain the possibility we would do Skype or Zoom or something like this. But now it's the only way people can do it. Even us, even though we're from the same place, we can't obviously sit in the same room. So we're like, fuck it, we'll go and ask him. And then I think for us, it's kind of like, just to have the brass neck, the worst thing that's going to happen, he's going to say no.
And the thing is, if COVID wasn't here, there's no way would he be obviously stuck in his house. He wouldn't have done the interview.
He'd be too busy.
He'd be too busy. He'd be making something.
Yeah, I think a lot of people
something.
have took advantage. Like, I'm just kind of thinking, I don't think I've actually seen Therese in the flesh since before March. I'm trying to think.
Maybe the end of January, early February even.
Yeah, and I mean, the only member of the team I've actually seen physically was Therese is the deputy editor, and there's Joe McElroy, and we were at a screening at Tenet, and we just came out and had a chat afterwards. I haven't seen anybody, just kind of with social distance stuff, and it's awkward, but you know, we've got a little WhatsApp group that is filled with 99% nonsense and
just flat out memes.
Yeah, just memes, and that's it. And just, you know, there's the likes of Darren and stuff. We just got in the habit. One of the group will be like, "How's everybody doing?" Kind of checking in and all that stuff. And it is weird, but you've kind of got used to it. And the Zoom, I don't know what you guys think, but for Zoom, for me anyway, I don't know what Therese thinks. It is just kind of the same as I don't think the podcast has changed. I think the Zoom and having the video, that's why we stopped using Skype, because Skype, we just did audio. And it was just kind of, it was kind of like a stop, right, I've stopped talking, Therese, what do you think, Joe, etc. But Zoom, we can kind of ramble on and keep it as kind of normal-ish as what we can. I don't know what you think, Therese. I mean, it's weird. Like, I mean, we would have seen each other at least, we'll add in the TV show as well, maybe once a month at least.
No, it has been strange, and I think whenever at the beginning of lockdown, when it was a lot more stricter, you know, we had basically, I think one of the last things that we seen each other, we just had a meeting in Starbucks or something, but it was one of those things where this is going to be the year that we're going to do this, and this. We were going to try new things, and then obviously coronavirus hit, and we all, like everybody, you kind of just went into a slump, and like you didn't know whether you were coming or going, and we felt that initially there wasn't any real motivation to do anything because everything was just so shit.
Yeah.
And then we start, I think the WhatsApp group, we had like a Facebook group before, but the WhatsApp group kind of brought us more together. I don't mean to be cheesy, but like more of like a friendship element to it then, because we were all checking in, and it allowed us to have more like free flowing ideas. So for a while, every Friday we were doing like the tweet along and getting people involved to watch different films, and then we got involved with the big nerd quiz, and that was just from us basically doing it, and like you guys randomly reaching out, like just messaging them on Facebook being like, would be interested in doing a Disney quiz or a film quiz, and he was completely up for it. And I know now he's been doing a few of the podcasts as well. I think he was on one recently there, Jim, wasn't he?
Yeah, Mark's been great to work with.
Yeah.
And it's just that case of we've said hello and we've broke the ice. Now I can't get rid of him. I can't get rid of Mark. He's pretty much knocking on the door. No, I'm only joking. But no, it is weird. Like all that stuff feels like a lifetime ago. Like when you were trying to entertain yourself at lockdown. Now I know I'm in BT 28. All the stalkers can find me now. So we're kind of technically from Monday under another semi-lockdown again. The not quite lockdown.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like going like, oh, hopefully it won't be like before, where you have to kind of find ways of entertaining yourself. And it was just kind of ways of taking your mind off stuff, like the tweet along. Sometimes they worked in terms of getting kind of not mass, but getting a lot of pulling people in.
Mm-hmm.
But once football and stuff started coming back, and there was more distractions, it was kind of like a case. I think we need to knock these on the head. Maybe another time we'll do them. I know there's other places like Fright Club, I think, are still doing the watch-alongs on a Thursday night. We reached out to them through Twitter, and now we're working with them on a couple of projects. So,
did your productivity stop a wee bit or slow down when lockdown first happened? Because I know for us personally, we actually were
more productive
because we weren't obviously in the same house or same place anymore. So we obviously, the things we would do together, we did the same, but apart. Somehow we had more content for our YouTube channel to the point where we had too much, but it stopped because there was no one's watching it.
For me, I don't know about Therese. I mean, I kind of found myself kind of wanting to be in a slump, but wasn't able to because we had to make a call with the TV show with NVTV, and we kind of sit down with them every year and kind of like, right, how many episodes we'll have to commit to, etc. When we're going to be on, when we're going to be off. And if it hadn't, I'll honestly say, if it hadn't been for that, and then just silly stuff like the tweet-alongs, and then we kind of started a little thing for a while on a Sunday, the Sunday lockdown hangout on Instagram, using Instagram Live, and that was fun. That kind of kept me busy. But at the very start, it was the simple fact that the TV show needed to be filmed. We weren't able to get into a studio, so that's why that set up the camera and all was there for a while, and that kept me productive. And then, I think I vaguely remember, I think it was either Therese or Joe suggested doing a pandemic podcast, kind of what movies have taught us, kind of that idea of what movies have taught us how to survive these situations, and stuff like that. So like being with the podcast stuff, there's no such thing as a silly idea. There's a silly podcast and there's a silly host pretty much 99% of the time. But we just kind of rocked on, and there's other things that it's kind of scheme. In some areas you were more productive, but in other areas you were kind of like, right, we have done absolutely zero.
But even outside, so like obviously the dynamic of how you work has changed, but the actual industry itself that you're working in completely changed. So it's not only are you dealing with the fact that you're now all working from home and using Zoom, there's no fucking films coming out. I mean, there's nothing like Tenet you'd mentioned there. It just kind of came out, and that was like the first movie that's come back into the cinema. We just done our review on it, and we're a wee bit divided. What did you think of Tenet? What did you think of it as a movie?
Have you seen it yet, Therese?
No, I was all gung ho, and then you and Joe had have basically put it on the back burner for me. So I might have to. I'm not motivated. I'm motivated to see Bill and Ted, and that's just because it's just great.
So I'm guessing from that there that you weren't a fan then, Jim?
Well, do you know what? Here's my caveat. Right, I love and adore Chris Nolan. I just think he's a filmmaker that understands the spectacle of cinema and treats his audience with respect. All that yada yada boring stuff.
He's amazing. Blah blah blah.
But he is someone who doesn't sit down and say, right, keep up. It's like you're either with it or you're not. And Tenet, when I watched it, I think, I'll be honest, on the day it happened, that week, you guys hopefully have an expletive written. I think Trez is cursed, so I'm not the first. I think my week at that time, personally, a lot of just was in a shit place and in a shitty time. And I wasn't in the mood for it. And it didn't kind of, do you know that thing, like, I think it's Joe always makes this joke, like Joe in the Guinness advert with the dreamboat that is Michael Fassbender, when he has that pint of Guinness and it is that euphoric moment and it's like everything is right in the world, happy days, I'm going to be like Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3 and dance around the street. I kind of put all that pressure on Tenet to be that moment for me, and when it wasn't, when it's just like it's a 3-star meh, it's fine, I'm like, oh, hang on, I need something that's going to get me kind of pumped again. I've also been out for a pint and not had that situation. I've also been out for like my first McDonald's since lockdown, and it's like none of these things give me, I think I just need to do heroin. That's it. Heroin, you get that fix every time. I've seen Tenet. I've technically went to see Tenet 3 times. I count 2.5 because I walked out of the screening at the Odeon because unfortunately cinema might be back, folks, but the cinema wankers are also back as well.
Oh shit.
And the 3rd time when I went to see it again, I actually really enjoyed it. Not that sense of that I didn't understand it. It makes perfect sense to me. Just when you don't have to, when you can just sit back and let a film wash over you, you know where it's going to go, you know kind of what's going on, you can pick up different things. And I think it's a better film than I initially give it credit, but I don't think it's 5-star quintessential.
I think for me, like whenever during our review, I'll not spoil, obviously you haven't seen it, so I'll not spoil anything. In every movie that is made, there's always things you just have to take with a pinch of salt. There's always things that are left unexplained. There's always stuff that you just have to accept, okay, this happened. For me, Tenet, there was too many of those things. It's almost like you'd say that Nolan treats his audience with respect and he expects them to keep up, but there was 5-6 things that just happened that were left completely unexplained. And then I think it tips the balance for me sometimes. Sometimes I just think, well, maybe that you're just not telling the story very well. And I know you had way different views than me. And again, I come probably similar to you, Jim. I really enjoyed the movie, but to me, it just didn't hit the way I expected it to. And I don't think it's even in his top 5 best films.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I just think it. I think it was Mark Kermode in BBC, and I was listening to him in 5 Live, and I was like, that's exactly how I feel. Where it delivers for me and hits me as a piece of cinema, as a spectacle, and something that you need to see on the big screen, but it doesn't hit me emotionally. And I think that's down to the writing. I think it's, you look at all Nolan's films at his best. I was watching Memento last night in BBC 2, fantastic film about a husband who wants to find the murder of his wife. You think of Interstellar, it's some Matthew McConaughey wants to get home to see his children. In Inception, you've got
there's always a family element involved in his movies.
And there's that something that resonates with you at an emotional level. Like Inception is a film on one level about being able to go into people's dreams and manipulate people's subconscious, but it's also about a father who wants to get home to see his children. Same with Interstellar. It's about humanity, reaching out to the outer reaches of space and finding their humanity, but it's also about a father who wants to get home to see his daughter again. And those are the things, that's what's missing for me in Tenet. I know there's a storyline with a mother and son. That just didn't hit me, and it's not a sexist thing. It's really not. It's just the way it's written. It's too, like Nolan has sat and kind of in post-Interstellar, isn't it Kip Thorne, the physicist that he works with he worked with in Interstellar. It's like he's consumed all that knowledge and has tried to kind of emotionally detach himself, and that's my issue.
It feels a wee bit soulless, just slightly. Just that there's just something missing. That's what I felt as well. Like, I do not need a lovey-dovey love story or like 500 things that make me care about the characters, but I do need something. Like, we're talking about such grand scale things, again, no spoilers, that are going to happen here, and you have to care about the people on the screen. And for me, I just didn't. It's not that I didn't care. I thought acting wise they were brilliant. Because you know so little about them, it's hard to then care about the ramifications for what's going to happen. That was mine. It was nothing to do with story based, or it was just, even the pacing. I thought the sound quality in the movie there was a lot of problems with that. But I do think, just in general, I just didn't care enough about the people.
Do you not think, right? And I know you haven't seen it, Therese, but generally that final when people kind of talk about, oh, I couldn't hear this and hear that, and it's the third time. I know it sounds like the third time I really like the film, but the third time I watched it, I didn't have those issues with the sound. I genuinely didn't. And I think it's because the first time, when you're not emotionally engaged and you're not engaged, you find yourself, well, I'll nitpick this, I'll nitpick that. Oh, I don't really like this. But like in a film like Inception or Interstellar, it's probably all mixed the exact same way. But because you're more engaged and you're more on board and you're like, I want to know what happens next. I want to know what happens next.
Yeah,
you don't care about those
you're
things.
You're fully listening because you're engrossed in the story. It sounds to me like he is highbrow and he's a great director, but it just sounds, from not saying it, that he went too far this time. And given, yes, when he made the film, he didn't know the coronavirus was going to happen. He didn't know that this was going to happen. So there's another thing as well. Do you think that if it was released as a normal film without all of this crack going on, that everybody's going to have had such excitement and want for it to be good, because it was the first film that's been in the cinema. It's Christopher Nolan. Like, you expect this from him. So, Nolan, if it had been released at a different time, would people have had different reactions to it?
Chris Nolan didn't ask to be the savior of cinema. He didn't ask to be that. It was just a case of his love for the medium, his love for the big screen meant that he wasn't prepared to let a film go premium rental.
I think you made a good point there, Trez. I think this movie is about, like, people want the cinema scene, as you said there, Jim. We all needed this movie in our lives. We needed a new movie. Why before people would have wanted to see it. Now the cinemas were packed out, well, mostly sold out where I was going to. So a lot of people were going because they needed that release. They needed that, like, separation from being in lockdown, and they needed to get a step away from what we're actually facing in society. But before, if that was just released in a normal time, if people would just be wanting to see it and wanting to like it and want to enjoy it, a bit more. There's less pressure on the movie. I think that's why a lot of people were almost not annoyed at the movie, but don't like it as much as they maybe would have.
Yeah, and I think that's probably true. Like, obviously it had the burden a lot. I just think with the sound, we had talked about it, that potentially he does it. I know you maybe think the third time you're watching it wasn't an issue, but I think maybe because every word in this movie is so important, like, there's no throwaway phrases, that maybe he does it on purpose to get your attention. You have to really listen to what's happening here.
Yeah, you have to pay attention. I mean, that's what you should do at the cinema anyway. I mean, when I went to see Tenet the second time with my cousin, we sat at a screening where it was grand. It was an okay screen. Okay, sometimes in a multiplex you get people who'll kind of hold their phone up kind of halfway through the screen and be like, right, I need to check Snapchat right now. And you're like, would you
really important to check that?
But I know who's that one person that's going to message you. But there was a group of kids arrived in pretty late. They arrived in late, which annoyed me. I'm a pain in the arse at the cinema, right? I'm that guy.
I can't.
And they arrived late, and then they all went to the back as a group. Then they started chatting. They started taking their phones out, taking photos during the film. They then, at one point, a couple of them started to, ring people, or they were looking at videos. They just weren't engaged at all. And then it's not a spoiler to say that the great, the wonderful, the Northern Irish god that is Kenneth Branagh is in this film,
great.
and he's got the Russian accent. It's not as bad as my Borat-esque accent. But they anytime he was on, they just started going blah 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 blah, and I was like, okay, I would do that at home on this podcast, but I wouldn't do it in the setting. So I went and complained to the ushers, and they were like, came in. As soon as they came in, they were like, we seen the group, they were like, shh, 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 shh. So they came in. Nobody said anything. Then, as soon as they left, they started chatting again. I sent my cousin out, and the ushers came in again, did nothing. I went a third time and complained, and they were like, look, anytime we go in, they're not doing anything, they're not disrupting. And I was like, well, I'm here, I'm telling you, they fucking are. And it just started again, and about, I'm trying to think, it wasn't even an hour into the film. I was like, you know what, fuck it. I didn't pay, what is it, £6-7 to kind of sit through this. I'll come back and watch it. So my new tip for people, if you want to get to the cinema now, to avoid cinema wankers, we used to have a feature in the podcast, Cinema Wankers of the Week. I'm going to bring it back, unfortunately. And it's just go in if you can, on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, or if you are lucky enough to go during, because I was off, I was in for a meeting with NBTV, and I was like, right, I've got a couple hours to kill, fuck it, I'll go to the cinema. Went with 4 other people, and it was great, and I enjoyed it so much more, and just kind of all those things. Yeah, but the whole thing about keeping attention, you know, I think I have no problem with that. If Nolan's going to sit and say he's going to mix his sound naturally, so you have to fucking pay attention whilst you're watching the film, that's fine. Because for me, and I don't know what you think, Tres, cinema has always been, and always will be, there's a bit where I go on a, like a kind of the closest thing to church for me, but it's the place where I go when I feel a bit crap, when I feel down, when I feel, I'll say it, depressed. I go to cinema to lose myself for maybe an hour and a half.
100%.
And I never got that at home. I talked about this a lot. Watching stuff at home over lockdown might be a film I've watched 1,000
Can't focus.
times.
I find I just can't pay attention.
You don't get away from these. You don't get away from the distractions, and you find yourself, you're kind of watching something. Like I was watching in prep for the new Bill and Ted. I watched the 2 Bill and Teds back to back on Friday. Great shows, by the way.
I was excellent. Was it Excellent Adventure, the first one there?
Yeah.
But I don't know what's Bogus, but I remember Bogus always being better. I'm not too sure if that's correct still.
Bogus is better.
Bogus is definitely better, yeah.
Station. But anyway, I was watching, and I find myself kind of, because you go to yourself, oh, I know him. Who's that? Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I'll start. But I'll be honest, I wouldn't dare do that in the cinema.
No.
My usual trip is, do you know what I do? I leave my phone in the car. I leave my phone in the car and say, right, I can't get distracted. And you know, when the first couple of trips back, I've been a couple of times to the cinema. We have the Omniplex here in Lisburn where I am. Then I've been to the Odeon because we have the Limitless card. But going back the first couple of times, I think it was Onward. And there was that kind of real lovely feeling to be back in your cinema seat, lights going down, the screen going bright, and just losing yourself. And
it's excitement. It's everything's all the emotions. It's like romantic. It's something about it's nostalgia as well. Me and Stephen talk about it all the time in the podcast. Something about going to see a movie in the cinema, regardless what it is. Sometimes you just want to go there because it's the experience you're paying for. It's getting in them seats. You're getting the popcorn. You're sitting down, setting up. It's how a movie should be viewed. And touching on that there, like I used to work in the cinema. I worked in the Odyssey Cinema for about a year and a half there. I have obviously left, but what I felt like before COVID happened, multiplex cinemas were going on the downhill anyway. What do you think now after COVID? Do you think they're going to last that long? Do you think like cinemas like Yorkgate and stuff are going to be able to sustain future customers, to be fair? Because everything's almost streaming now.
Yeah, I mean, I think me and Jim talked about this, but the worry whenever the cinemas started opening again was that they'd went down the route of showing old films, which for a while would work. Like I know Yorkgate was showing like the Harry Potters, and they were doing like that in Glengormley on a Friday night. We're doing like horror nights and things like that, which is a good ploy to get people out. But I would say there's only so much that they're going to be able to do and say revisit. I think with everything coming back to the point of like all the cinema wankers and stuff like that, people are going to be bored. Like you can go out and you can go to a restaurant, but if you're sensible and not a dickhead and want your family to survive, you're going to be smart about what you do. Whereas, with Tenet, like there's going to be people going to the cinema who couldn't give a shit about Christopher Nolan. Like those kids who were probably in that couldn't name another one of his films, but because it's there and it's something to do, that's what they went. QFT, they are released. They've as part of Memories of Murder, they're showing that on Friday, I don't want to say his name because I always butcher it, but it's the director of Parasite.
Your man.
Your man,
Himmer. Aye,
Boone.
Himmer.
I think it's Boone.
That fella.
Aye, Himmer. You all know him.
So, you know, directors themselves, he's actually put that forward to be re-released. So I don't know, unless directors themselves start making executive decisions to re-release some of their big films and make that more of a show rather than the cinema taking it upon themselves, because I don't know how long it's really
For
gonna
me,
last.
whenever they re-release a movie into the cinema, I'm torn on it, because I've got good experiences of it and I've got bad experiences of it. So I remember seeing in Queen's Film Theatre, I seen Blade Runner, and I'd never seen Blade Runner before. It was one of those movies that I just had never seen. It was the director's cut, the final cut, I think it was. And I'd never seen it before, and I went to Queen's Film Theatre, and it was one of the best experiences of going to see a movie I've ever had. But at the same time, I've also went to see Halloween again in the cinema, and because I know the movie so well, again, even like, because also everyone in that film theatre, I've also seen this 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. They're not focusing. No one cares. There's no, like, you don't get the same sort of cinema magic. I mean, it's just maybe that was my experience of it at that time. But because I know every word of dialogue, then you're more inclined to check your phone, or you're more inclined. So I just don't know how sustainable it is to keep releasing movies that have already been out before.
I'll be devil's advocate. I think that the idea of releasing older movies is such a good idea personally, because I got to see The Matrix last year for the first time in the cinema, and I love Matrix, but I saw it in the cinema. This is the way it's meant to be saw and watched. So for me, I get to see classic movies that I wasn't born for. Not saying I was born for Matrix, but like
only
other
13.
Maybe you were born in the Matrix and this is all an illusion. There we go.
There you go.
Mind blown.
So for me, I'm like, yes, re-releases, but when the cinema's only thing they have is classic movies, then it's not going to be sustainable for the future. Like, I don't mind at Christmas time, like watching It's a Wonderful Life or Night Before Christmas, all these classics that you want to see in the cinema and you didn't get a chance to see when you were a kid. So you want these here, but for going forward, it can't be relied on too heavily, I don't think.
Well, this is the way I kind of lie. I agree with both of you, or all three of you. Cinemas can't rely on cult classics for a couple of reasons. A, because you're not bringing anything new into the cinematic space, but also, and I probably, as one of many people, have vested interest. There's community cinema groups here in Northern Ireland. They're all over, not just Northern Ireland, but in the UK, Ireland, the world. And those are things that community cinema groups do. I know that's things we do. We've brought back screenings of The Warriors. We do I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. We've done
Lost
stuff
Boys.
like Lost Boys, Dogma. We did Dogma in a church a couple of years ago. We've done the Fog on the Barge. So those are what community cinema groups tend to do. Sometimes it might be introducing foreign cinema or giving a platform to foreign cinema to an audience that might not get the chance to see it. You know, in Northern Ireland, we have one independent. We've got the Strand, we've got the QFT. QFT brand itself being the home of independent cinema in Belfast, but it's also mostly in Northern Ireland. I'm someone from Omagh originally, and I would have to drive 70 miles to go see, a film like Parasite that we mentioned earlier on. It wouldn't always get screened. So that's my thing. I mean, if we have cinemas doing a lot of cult classics, it closes a window for community cinema groups to do stuff. But in terms of audiences coming to cinema, I think there will always be people who will want to go to the cinema, not necessarily be wankers. Please don't. Hopefully that's not the case. Although I do think people are losing that cinema etiquette. I remember speaking to Sean Kelly from Into Film and I, and he kind of said, "There's this blew my mind. There's kids as old as 18, 19 have never been to the cinema.
People go to the cinema once a year sometimes.
Yeah, because it's a costly expense. But now when you look at it, we're seeing the dominoes falling because of President Trump and how he's handled the United States. Cinemas there are not in a state to kind of reopen en masse. I think it's New York, LA, I think it's San Francisco. I think mostly those cinemas are closed. So those are big window or big areas for cinema to kind of get money, get box office revenue. That's not there. So you've seen in the last week, Tenet has opened in the States now quite softly. People don't feel safe to go out into the cinema. And I know there's members in our group that are shielding. The likes of Darren Vincent shields. The likes of Jess Blair has been shielding. Jess Blair, I was speaking to her a couple of weeks ago. She's not still kind of confident to go out to the cinema. And that's I'm completely fine with that. If you don't feel safe to go to the cinema, do not go. Cinemas are doing as much as they can. But now the problem is, you're going to find that, well, Wonder Woman's now been put back to December. You've got Candyman has now been put back to next year. But it's good because we see that studios are, for now, committed to not going down premium rental. I mean, is any of you guys, and Therese, have you ventured into premium rental stuff, or even the Mulan from Disney Plus?
No, because I'm a rat and like to do things illegally.
I like value for money personally, and I don't see. Can I
just clarify that Therese said this on your podcast, and she's
and
never
it's not getting edited out.
No. We don't say this on our podcast. Everything is above board.
It's the thing. People want to see stuff. If people want to see stuff in cinema, so at the minute we have, I think Bond is November. Bill and Ted is next week. Whether you count Bill and Ted as a big blockbuster,
I do.
Wonder Woman 1984 is going back to December. June's probably going to get put back to next year. So everything is going to get put. But we're now coming into what would be flu season. We're seeing like R rates going up in the UK. If cinemas here or if it goes bad, we have to go down to a lockdown. That's just going to get put back. And I know Chris Causeway from Causeway Pictures kind of talks about cinema is going to change. There's no denying that. We're seeing like the windows being shortened for, I think it's Universal have shortened that down. It's going to change. I would not want to be someone who's running a cinema right now, because you will be feeling serious stress.
Uncertainty.
Yeah, and by windows you mean the time that the picture can stay in the cinema is now shortened on certain. I think was it Universal? I can't remember what studio it announced.
Because Universal basically, this is my big thing, right? This is my thing that I get really annoyed about, and I ranted about this in a lot of our podcasts. So premium rentals came about with Trolls World Tour. Anyone who listens to my podcast thinks I'm fucking obsessed with that film. I still haven't seen it, and I'm not in a rush to see it. So the Universal decided to skip cinemas when they started to close and say, right, we'll do a premium rental. And it was $15.99, whatever it was, you could watch it for 24 hours. And that was great. I don't necessarily have an issue with that as a platform, as an idea, as a concept, because $15.99, as we said earlier on, is probably cheaper for some family members to go to the cinema as a kind of one-off expenditure. Yeah. But what really then bugged me was Universal came out as a result of that and said, it's been a huge success. Nearly went full Donald Trump there. Huge, China. And they said, we made as much from this as they would have had they released it in the cinema. And I was like, you can't judge it. Yeah. Because cinemas are closed. If people want to get your content, unless they're Therese and get it illegally, they have to pay for it. They have to pay and go to your premium rental service. Now, the one I'm interested in is the one. Well, I thought this was going to happen with Mulan. I thought that what Disney were going to do, put it on their service, 20 quid. If you want to get it, you can watch it as many times as you want to your heart content until it's released on December on the service. But I thought they were going to release it in cinemas at the same time to give a simultaneous release, because that's the only way you're going to ever really judge. If people want to consume your product, they have a choice. Where cinemas are open and where it's safe to do so, release it in the cinema and put it on a premium rental service. I think they're doing that in the States with Bill and Ted. I'm not quite sure of the figures. Yeah,
I think in America it got released 2 weeks ago, or it's like the end of August. Yeah, in America, while here is obviously it's getting released in cinemas like as you said next week. So I think you can't download it here anywhere. But I think, in fairness to Bill and Ted, which I love the first two movies, that movie itself, it kind of seems more tailor-made to Netflix anyway. It doesn't seem as if like that if you're going to make a movie, Bill and Ted, if you told me that was on Netflix, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, but you know what though? I was talking about this with Joe after we watched Tenet. As I said earlier on, Chris Nolan never asked to be the savior of cinema, right? He's just someone who adores the medium, adores and understands the spectacle of cinema, and said, "Right, I love the big screen. That's where I want my film to be released, if and when it's possible. I don't want it going down premium rental. I don't want this. That I want people to enjoy that film for the first time on the big screen. But it's a big budget film. It's never going to be the savior of cinema. It's never going to be the savior of cinema. A film like Unhinged with a super fat Russell Crowe who's been following my diet plan for like the
I
last.
saw that.
I don't know what's going on with that either. It's mad. That man was Maximus.
Do you know what though? I loved it. I thought
liked
it was.
as well.
It's probably made for pittance, but a film like Bill and Ted, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 million off the top of my head of kind of how much it would cost to make. If a film like that goes into cinema and makes money and makes its money well, and because it's like three times your budget you've got to make back to be seen as profit. If that goes in and does well, a film like Bill and Ted will be the savior of cinema. But if Bill and Ted goes into the cinema and it boom, you will see studios say, well, people will want to consume the product through premium rental service.
Yeah, streaming services, yeah.
I don't mind Netflix. I know a lot of people are quite upset about the whole cuties thing that's going on, which is I don't know if any of you have seen this.
I've heard about it. It seems a bit mad.
What is it?
It's a French film. I can't remember the name of the director. First-time filmmaker. Film that screened at Sundance. Was released in France early this year. About a group of children who get into a dance group, and this girl is, I think, Senegalese immigrant, and she's kind of traditional background, and she discovers about being a woman and sexuality through watching like the Kim Kardashian stuff on Instagram. And they do, at the end of the film, it is awkward to watch, there's no denying it, a very sexualized dance in front of an audience. And the way Netflix have tried to market this is by putting rather sexy photos of these young girls up, or taking content out of context, and people are on uproar about this. But
that's what I've heard about the movie. I've heard that it's not actually the movie itself, it's how Netflix have marketed the film.
Do you know what? The film is one of my favorite films of the year so far. Genuinely, honest to God, it's brilliant. It's a great film. And it's not at all. People are kind of saying it's for pedophiles. It's all about sexualizing young children. It's not at all. It's just, young men don't have the monopoly of telling young childhood stories. They can be told from a female point of view as well. And it's a great film. So, but Netflix is great. There's no denying that. I mean, I'm currently like getting ready to binge, when it's all available, like The Boys on Amazon Prime, and there's Shudder, which I love. There's no problem with those streaming services. I've no bother with them all. They're all great. They can all coexist. But cinema is just that space for me. It is the closest thing to church for me.
You also gotta remember, like, kids born in the 2000s. Kids are like 20 years old now. Like, they grew up, or even kids born in like recently enough, they're gonna grow up with streaming service. They're going to be growing up with the idea that a movie is just a touch of a button away. Like, they can just log in and watch anything. So that it's more of an inconvenience to get up, drive down, book a ticket, get popcorn, sit down, be quiet, not talk to your friends. So for us growing up, that's the only way we've seen movies. But for kids nowadays, they're not going to... They don't have that same
relationship with the cinema.
Exactly. So for me, my fear is that this is going to cause movies and cinema places just to close down, which I don't want.
Yeah.
Well, you look in Belfast. Like, I know Trez and I recorded a podcast about the Dublin Road cinema. I was in town the other day, and it's weird walking past it, not seeing the movie posters, not seeing the advertising,
seeing the sign. Yeah, like it's just strange.
There's only one cinema now in Belfast city centre, and that's the Odeon. And the Odyssey's still kind of down. It's not open. I know it's in the process of being rebranded into Cineworld.
Yeah,
I was looking the other day. Their website's gone. I mean, whether or not that's just an error while staff are furloughed, the Odyssey Cinema website's gone now. Yeah. You've only really got in the Belfast city centre the likes of not Glengormley. That's definitely not Belfast city centre. You've got Cityside, and then you have the Omniplex in West Belfast. So they're not in the city centre. There's the Strand as well. I mean, I love the Strand Cinema in East Belfast. But I remember anytime we do an event at it, people are like, oh, could you not do it at the QFT? It's like, but you're fucking living in East Belfast. It's easier for you to get there. Support your cinemas if you do like cinema at all. do get out and support them as best you can. I know when the Strand reopened, the night they were showing The Lost Boys for the week. I was like, right down, boom, and I'm hoping to get back again in the next few weeks. They are a special space. There's a place for me. I know I'm that old man. I come back to that point where I go, if I just want to just relax, I will sit and go to the cinema and just unwind. And that's my price of admission, is to get away from all the nonsense that's going on in my personal life, all the nonsense that's going on with COVID and all the news and just generally Donald Trump. You can get away from all that stuff.
And even the way you view a movie is reflected in that way. So you could go in and see a movie and say you do feel depressed and you feel down. And even if the movie's not that great, but it cheers you up, you'll tell your friends it's the fucking best movie I've ever seen. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to be like, it really, like, it's how a movie makes you feel. Like, for me, I always try to be like, right, I recognize this isn't the greatest movie every time.
Like The Meg, you love that movie.
I love The Meg, and I recognize that The Meg is awful, but I remember watching it and just laughing, and I was like, so I'm not going to tell someone this is absolutely shit, don't see it, whenever I had a good experience watching it. Yeah. And that's fine. And like, what I don't like is when people tell you what you should and shouldn't like. Yeah. That's something that pisses me off a lot. And it happens so much in the movie sphere. It's like it can be quite a snobby area sometimes. It's like, and especially we talked about Tenet. There will be people who genuinely get on like, you didn't like that movie because you didn't understand it, which I think is a really condescending way to speak to people. And I think movies in general, people need to learn more to disagree. Like, if Dan tells me he thinks this movie's amazing, I just say, fucking great. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, I'm glad you got stuff in.
I just didn't like it. But that's fine. I'm not going to try to change his mind.
That's for me, and like film critics, that's for me. I have this weird relationship even with Mark Commode from the BBC. My brother loves him and stands by what he says is the gospel. And then Mark Commode would say something, and obviously Mark Commode knows more than me about movie and why a movie's good and why it's not good. He explains it all. But again, his opinion is his opinion. Like, I keep saying, my brother, like, he is just a human being who has an opinion on a movie, and I'm a human being who has an opinion on a movie. He's going to like articulate how a movie should go. But again, if he didn't like it, doesn't mean it's a crap movie. I try to explain to people out there, if you don't like a movie, you don't like it. If you like it, then like it. Don't try to defend why you like a movie. Because
people say, it's like, I really like that movie. Really? The reviews are terrible?
Yeah,
I really good. That's fine. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I really liked it.
I fucking hate that.
Yeah.
I have a boyfriend. He's terrible for it. Like, we're both really big film fans, and like I studied film at uni and stuff, and like I love, so see Scoob, like the new animated one. I love Scooby Doo. See the old Scooby Doos, they're fucking brilliant, right? Amazing. And I do not care what anybody says, but I watched the Scoob, the new animated one, and same thing. I understand it's a shit kids film, but I absolutely loved it because it brought me back to sitting watching Cartoon Network whenever you were a child, watching all the Scooby-Doo and trying to work out who,
It's always the first guy you meet.
Yeah.
It's always the first person you meet.
Trez, is Scrappy Doo in it?
No, but I love Scrappy.
No, we're right. You're entitled to your opinion, but you're wrong. No.
But also, I think people need to remember as well. Do you ever see you have these conversations with your friends who are like, oh, cartoons aren't as good these days? Like, that's because cartoons aren't made for you anymore.
Yeah.
The reason we love the cartoons like Tom and Jerry and like Scooby Doo, like Top Cat, that's because they're older than us, but we grew up with them.
How old are you, Matt? I mean, you do not look like a man that's as old as my father. Like going, I love a bit of Top Cat.
But you know, like Top Cat was obviously re-released when I was a kid, and it was always like the older
like,
versions.
Yeah, like it was always on Boomerang and all. Like Boomerang used to show all the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons. I love that as well.
But I feel like nowadays everything's reanimated for the kids these days, and people are like, oh, it's just not as good as it was because you're not a kid anymore.
You know what though, Matt? It's true. Cartoons aren't as good as they used to be.
I'm Dan, by the way, not Matt.
Oh, sorry, Dan. Sorry, I got that.
Don't worry about it. I've been called worse.
Yeah, that's all right. No, they're not as good. Cartoons aren't as good as they used to be.
Unless it's Bob's Burgers is good, but that's obviously not for
That's about it.
Yeah, but again, I always think we're not kids anymore. Like, we're not made for these. These are obviously for the new kids now. And my nephew, who's like 8 now, he fucking loves them shit. Like, he'll be all over it. I'm like, what's this old Tom and Jerry skit? And he's like, I just don't get it. You know what I mean? So I'm like, yeah, like,
it's the same as any medium, same as music as well. Like, everyone that thinks that their generation music's the best, You know what I mean? And then you want to die on that sword. It doesn't matter. It's like my dad. I do actually subscribe to the fact that music was a lot better a long time ago, but I also, I mean,
because you're old.
Yeah, maybe, but music in the 70s and the 60s I actually prefer, but it doesn't mean that all music now is terrible.
It's all subjective. It's like films, all subjective. Like if you have a movie,
I just miss music videos. That's what I miss when there was the era of the MTV and the great music video. That's what I miss now. And what was the last great music video you remember?
Don't watch them anymore.
Yeah,
Just use Spotify.
YouTube. It's all YouTube now, isn't it? I don't know. I couldn't even think of a movie. Well, we do reactions of music on our channel, so we should do this.
I know, true. I don't know. I
Run the jewels.
I don't know.
There you go.
You're right. I think the actual making of the music video, maybe it's less important now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Because it's costly. That's why. Like you think of like the days of like if some people are going as old as Top Cat, like the days of Michael Jackson when the latest music video was an event in itself. Like I wasn't old enough when Thriller first came around, but that was a massive thing.
Yeah.
And like I remember, I think the first kind of real kind of music video I think I ever remember really being aware of was it Michael Jackson's Bad? When he's is that the one where he kind of just goes out and kicks the shit out of a car or kind of dances on top? I can't remember it specifically, but you remember music videos and kind of the days of, coming home late at night after a night out and throwing on one of the music channels and sitting watching the terrible Chinese or Chippy, whatever you got, and sitting and watch music videos.
Yeah.
Also, like I think there was like a Blink 182 video they did rock show and they spent $500,000 on the video, and it's basically them was just giving away money, like getting cars, destroying them, going to homeless people, giving them money. $500,000 they spent, because that's so important, because that probably made them triple, quadruple whatever they paid for that there. So it's like they know if they spend $500,000 on a music video, it's going to be worth it eventually, because they're going to get that money back in terms of record sales, people coming to their concert, views on like MTV and all. But obviously nowadays it's all about, if you just post an audio track onto YouTube, it gets like millions of views now. Yeah. So what's the point of even making a video?
Like the last music video I remember just being for its epicness, was it the Lady Gaga Beyonce? Was it Telephone? Or I can't remember. No, it's not Telephone. It's whatever one that they did together. And
Telephone,
kind of they had they had
Telephone,
was it the Pussy Wagon from Kill Bill, and it's just great. I mean, Lady Gaga was doing music videos for a while when it was kind of uncool, but that's kind of going down a complete other segue. But no, in answer to an early statement, cartoons were better. When you had real Ghostbusters, Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So before we wrap this up altogether, you'd mentioned a couple of things about sort of bad experiences that you've had in the cinema with other cinema goers, cinema wankers. I just want to give you two of mine, and then you can maybe share one or two of your own. So I remember I went to see, I think it was the Avengers Age of Ultron, and packed cinema. And I think there's certain movies that whenever the cinema is packed, it is better, because a movie like that there, you do want an atmosphere. But I remember there was a lady in front of me, and she had her kid with her, and she kept picking up her phone, and she was filming part of the movie. So like on Snapchat, right? But for me, my experience of this, she wasn't doing it to parrot the film.
You're going to jail?
No, she wasn't doing it to parrot the film. She was just Snapchatting people. But the result of that meant that I was watching this movie through her phone. I was like, I've paid to come to the cinema. Cinema's here. It's a massive movie. I've been looking forward to it. And I'm watching the Hulk fight Iron Man through this fucking Samsung phone that was right in front of me.
I quite like that. That's quite meta. Yeah,
I couldn't believe it. And I'm not the type of person. Sometimes I don't really like to complain. Do you know what I mean? I think I respect. Complain? No, I didn't, because I don't know. It's awkward. I find that experience of going and complaining about something. I'm the person that, if I get a meal in a restaurant and I say to my girlfriend, "This is stinking," and the waiter comes over, I go, "It's lovely."
You tip them off.
I tip them a lot. Like, you're doing a great job.
It's like when you get a haircut. It's like when you get a haircut and you're like, just a wee bit there. And then it's just a case of like, oh, this is complete. But I'll very quickly, I'll tell you. I remember once, because I always thought like all hairdressers had the same code. And my hairdresser, Noma, used to say call it like a 3-2-1. So it's like a 3, a 2, and a 1 scale. Then I don't know. I'm not a hairdresser. But I just went to a different hairdresser, a barber's up in Belfast, was like, normally get a 3-2-1. And the guy was just like, zoom over the top with the razor. And at the end of that haircut, well, what are you going to do midway through? You're like, you can't stop.
No,
but you're just like,
take it back.
Yeah. But you're just like at the end of it when he's holding up the mirror, and you're like, "What do you think?" He's like, "Yeah, it's exactly what I wanted." Yeah.
Has anyone ever said anything other but like when they hold that mirror behind your head? Has anyone ever not said, "Yeah, I mean, that's fine"?
Yeah.
You don't see. What can you say?
I know. And my second terrible cinema one was, I think it was Godzilla we went to see. And it was also a packed cinema, and I was with my whole family.
The 90s one or the
No, it was the more recent one with Aaron Taylor. Was it, what do you call him?
Aaron Taylor Johnson or something?
Yeah. It was that one, and there was a guy behind me, right? And he was narrating the film. So like I was sitting there, and he just kept talking. Like he kept saying things like when Godzilla turned up, he kept saying things. It's completely unrealistic. And like he was behind me the whole time, and I was just like, I'm literally hearing this guy's, and he was very negative about the film. And he's like, "Oh, this is boring. Oh, this is shit." What did they say? Oh, like, and then Godzilla turns up. "Oh, this is unrealistic. That wouldn't happen." And I turned around and I was like, "You're watching Godzilla." Do you know what I mean? And then I ended up just starting into a bit of an argument. But I was just like,
during the cinema?
Yeah, I just probably made it worse. But
yeah, then you're being the dick.
But an hour into the movie, there's only so much you can listen to someone jab it behind you before you turn around and go, "Mate, can you fuck up?"
Yeah.
So that would have then had an effect on your opinion of the film as well. Like, because if he's sitting there constantly going, "This is shite," part of you would be like, "Well, do you know what? He's actually right. Like, part of this film is shite."
No, I was just getting angrier and angrier while I was sitting there. And I was like, "Is anyone else going to say anything to this guy? Is anyone going to say
You're waiting for
anything?"
someone else to say something.
Yeah. So I punched them. No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Well, I have never had that many bad experiences in the cinema. To be fair, my worst one was a big, massive brawl. About 5 people fighting each other, punching the face at each other.
Is that your worst? That's the best cinema trip ever.
I know. I have people like talking and stuff, but I'm
Hang
not
on. Did you have a cinema seat and popcorn, and you sat and watched this, and you're like, "Fuck"?
It happened outside. It started in the cinema, then the movie was over, then it started slabbering outside. Then the big massive brawl.
So it's
happened.
like the Family Guy thing, the Family Guy with Peter and the chicken.
The chicken started mauling each other.
It was more slabbering in the cinema than started fighting outside, but. They're bickering the whole time, so I kind of put you off the movie. But I'm that person who says, "Yo, fuck up." I will shout. I don't give a shit. I'll tell people to shut up in the cinema. Doesn't bother me. But that was my work experience because I decided to be like, I'll get involved and help out here. And I was in the middle of getting punched by people. I don't know what's going on. I was like blocking people while getting punched by 2 sides. I'm like, "Man, can I help you?"
I just want to watch Scooby-Doo.
Did you kind of Did you picture yourself kind of like just because you mentioned the Matrix earlier on, like, or is it Lawrence Fishburne when he's kind of like,
yeah, more Keanu Reeves. I had my leather jacket on though, so it felt really cool. I walked over it, but no, I realised leather isn't really free. You can't fight with a leather jacket on whatsoever. So I stopped wearing all leather. I stopped doing that there.
Could be worse. Could have been wearing leather trousers as well.
No, it was. That's why. But you have a worst cinema experience? The one that kind of, you always think back on, like, wow, that was annoying.
Well, mine isn't real. One of the worst ones. Mine isn't really from a cinema wanker, but it's more. Well, do you know what? It kind of is, but it's more from like somebody who works in the cinema being a wanker. So, I
was it the Odyssey?
No, it wasn't. It's fine. It was yeah. It was at the movie house. So my mummy's first job was working in the cinema in Glengormley, and the girl that she works with is the manager in the one in Yorkgate. So I think it was whenever Shallow Hal came out, and however long that was, and really? All of my friends were like a wee bit older, so I think it was a 12A or something like that, but I was only 11. And you were doing the whole thing of, you know, trying to convince the person to let you in. All the while, I still wasn't allowed to go to the cinema on my own at this point. So my mummy was with me, and she had agreed that she would tell them that I was 12. So it's fine. And we had just bought the ticket and we were moving in, and she had seen her old manager, and the two of them got talking, and I was standing there like really shit myself, like, this is the manager of the cinema. I'm not 12. This is illegal. I'm gonna go to prison. Like, all this stuff went through my mind. And the girl was like, "Well, what are you gonna go see?" And mummy was like, "She's gonna go see Shallow Hal, but she's not old enough to see it yet," thinking that it should just be a gig. Yeah. And no, the manager took the ticket off me, and exchanged it for the next film that was on at the same time, which was Ice Age Meltdown. So
Better movie.
literally,
Sounds like a good experience.
me and my mum, like, then I got really pissed off with her. So me and mummy were fighting. I sat on one side of the cinema, she sat on the other, and had to endure Ice Age Meltdown while everybody else was in laughing at Jack Black.
Were they though?
Probably not.
That's an
So
awful
that
movie.
basically the person at fault there, Trez, is your mum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still kind of hold it against her, to be honest.
Things haven't been the same since.
No,
Can
things have. We can't even sit in the same room.
Can I ask, like, I mean, you're not out of your parents' house now, or have you moved into your new home yet, Trez? Have you moved
No,
in?
I'm not moved in yet, but I'm spending. I'm in my mum and daddy's house now, but I've been spending more time over there, so it's a nice break.
I'm just wondering, you know, is bringing this painful memory up just going to be enough to kind of for you to go down to your parents and start to your mother going, remember the fucking time that, you know, I didn't get to see fucking Shallow Hal? How dare you? And
I'm just picturing you walking
a really
into the
fragile kind of wound that's just waiting to be kind of scratched open.
I'm picturing you walking back into your mum's house and Ice Age is on the TV and you're just like, nope.
Flashbacks, like Vietnam flashbacks. No, not again. I miss Jack Black. Alright guys, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Honestly, it was great talking to you and really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it was a
No
great
worries.
chat.
Thanks for letting me ramble and kind of talk nonsense. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be on, guys.
You are now listening to MCPodcasting.